This is the Griffin Realty Group Ask-A-Griffin podcast, episode number 26. Negotiation. How do you develop a win-win attitude? Are you a home seller or buyer who has questions about buying or selling residential property, but you can't find an easy way to get your answers? Well, then, hey, you're definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Griffin Realty Group and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. Now, to help you get started in the right direction, if you need to sell or buy property right now or in the near future, you can take advantage of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. That's GRIFFIN courses.com. All right, so let's get started in this episode. How do you develop a win-win attitude? It's important that you hear both of those wins in the title of this question. Remember that number one point here is remember that at the end of the negotiation stage, everybody has said yes. Let that sink in for a second. What does that really mean? Well, let's talk about what a negotiation really looks like. Obviously, a buyer comes to your property, they see it, they like it, they're interested enough. Maybe they come back multiple times. Maybe they just fall in love with it. They know what they're looking for. Whatever the case may be, all those variables begin to lead towards a written offer. And remember, a written offer is the only real offer. Okay, verbal offers, be careful of those. They don't really lead to anything that's helpful. Have somebody put down their full offer with all their terms and conditions. That's the best way to enter into a true negotiation. But really, in the beginning of this, you have to understand that the goal is that you all have agreed. In other words, there is a collective yes. Everybody has finally agreed and said, yes, that deal as written, that contract, that offer as written is acceptable based on its terms and conditions. So right off the bat, when you think about that collective, everybody, those words are all inclusive. Everybody collectively has said yes. Well, essentially, that's the cornerstone of a win-win mindset. That typically everybody gave up a little bit of something. And even in a hot market, if you can get your price and you have multiple bidders, you might be giving up something on timing. You might close faster than you wanted to, but everybody has generally given a little bit. Or maybe you just gave in right up front and you priced it right, and that's why your offer is easier. Or you're in a power position where, say, there's already been an investigation, a seller's home inspection, and it's being sold as is. That inspection's being given, whatever the case may be. All of those variables, no matter whether the buyer has more power in a marketplace or the seller, everybody has ultimately said yes. Because they've agreed on the value, they've agreed on the terms, and they've agreed now, this is a key point during negotiation, on the process. So let's get to the second point here and discuss the variables. You see, there are too many variables for you as the seller to try to control this process, especially post the home inspection. Now, again, I've given you an example already that in some marketplaces, it's possible where you can legitimately, I know in California, for example, many times there is a tradition in some of the better markets where a seller home inspection has been given. It is disclosed. Everybody shows it. It's still a caveat emptor, buyer beware situation. But if they're in that sort of a power position, then you can say, here's the home inspection. We've taken care of these items. We haven't taken care of these items. This is an as-is sale. Please sign off on that and recognize. And the home inspection is wiped out. Yes, that's a possibility. But in most marketplaces, and especially if a buyer agent has some leverage over the negotiation, they're going to ask for a home inspection. So a lot of these decisions are made quickly and visually and emotionally. When a buyer comes to your property and sees it and likes it and feels like lifestyle needs are met, everybody gets excited. Let's write the offer, they say emotionally. So the offer is written, but now there's that sobering moment for the buyer as they go through their process, as they hit through their contingency dates. And the number one and biggest part of this is the inspection. So now they bring in a home inspector amongst many other inspectors. They might be a well inspector, a septic inspector, a sewer inspector, and on and on and on it goes. But let's just presume a home inspector, a generalist comes in. They have an enormous checklist that they must go through from a liability standpoint. And they are going to go through all of these bullet points and point out everything that needs updating, everything that's out of code. They just have to do that to do the right thing and be compliant. In a lot of cases, that's going to do many things to the buyer and their psychology, and not the least of which is scare them. And now all of a sudden, what they thought they were buying requires them to spend money. So now they see their purchase price plus what they have to spend to bring it back into compliance or bring it into safety, whatever it might be. They are going to take another bite at the proverbial apple. They are going to try to renegotiate those items. Again, unless it has been an offer that's accepted without a home sale contingency, without an inspection contingency, you're, by the way, home sale contingency is another challenge. You see how many variables there are? I have so many in my head, I'm stumbling over all the possibilities. But the home inspection is another chance to renegotiate in the buyer's mind most of the time, because they say, we didn't know this when we made our offer. And you might want to push back and get worked up. And you did. You could see this, but stop. Stop. See, what you're beginning to learn is what the buyer really sees, what the buyer's process really is, in addition to yours. So you're going to have to, as the seller, make some adjustment that you might have to either do more yourself, fix more. And again, I always highly recommend a seller inspection prior to listing, so you know what a home inspector is going to look at, and you can disclose it. You can use that to say, look, we know this is here. We're not going to do anything. That's the best way to do this. But in most cases, somebody is not willing to spend the money to do a seller inspection, and they're going to make themselves open to this renegotiation around these items. And you can decide to fix them. You can decide to renegotiate. But I'll promise you, if you don't think win-win, you're going to feel attacked. You're going to get emotional. You're going to defend the product. You're going to now go back to your process. But we price reduced it. But we told them, don't nickel and dime us. That's fine. And those all might be factual statements. But we're back to a negotiation. And you have to go back to zero-based thinking, like I always say. Why are you selling this in the first place? And that no matter who the buyer is, you may or may not have to deal with these issues, but you have this real buyer in front of you who's trying to renegotiate some of the issues. So you can give a hard no in that renegotiation and risk losing the deal. You can compromise some of the items, take care of them, or you can make a cash offer. There are a lot of variables there. So not only did we have all these variables when we first were trying to put a deal together, now we might have them post-home inspection. Now you might have other items where I'll go back to that home sale contingency that I mentioned by accident. Now I'll go back to it intentionally. What happens if they can't sell their house, but yet they've offered you so much more money? Do you extend? Do you extend with kick-out clauses? There are a lot of variables in a deal during the negotiation that have to get agreed on, and oftentimes all sorts of things have to be extended. And it's really amazing to see how quickly a seller will get emotional, because we see this and we want it to be such a controlled, by the letter process, and it's not. Sometimes it is wonderful. That's called an easy deal. And they happen a lot, but there are plenty of times where variables interfere with the contract. So you have that choice to either play hardball and lose the deal, or renegotiate items that are reasonable. And when you're renegotiating items that are reasonable, you're thinking win-win. You're not allowing somebody to take advantage of you, quote unquote, but you're thinking, okay, that sounds like a reasonable request. You do a little due diligence. Why are they asking for the extension? What do they really need to do? Are they really completing their action steps? So that win-win attitude underneath you during that process allows you to say, well, I'll probably have to deal with this with anybody, so I can blow up this deal and then go do it. But what if I can't get back to this number again with another buyer? So I just want you to really think about that with all these variables, there needs to be flexibility, and flexibility comes from a win-win attitude. All right. Now, the last point here, and again, this is a tough subject, you can see, because it really gets us worked up about all the variables and the details. However, if you continue to focus on one fact, and it's the best news, you are dealing most of the time, I would say most of the time, I can't say absolutely all the time, a ready, willing, and able buyer. Now, I understand that there might be mortgage contingency, so the ability might be in question. That's why everybody asks for a pre-approval. Have you even had the financial sniff test? Do you even have a letter from the bank that says you have the wherewithal to pay cash? So I have seen that ability get questioned along the line during those contingencies. But let's presume that most of the time, this person who made the offer, who's begun to go through this contingency period and check their boxes, they are ready, willing, and able. And problem solving during negotiation and renegotiation and just the process to get it to in the closing table, you have to be flexible. You have to be. And you have to expect that some things might go wrong. But if you stay calm and you stay win-win by focusing on its reasonability and whether it makes sense. I mean, there are times where I've told my clients, this is over. This is over. It's no longer reasonable. I don't know what's going on here, but something's wrong. We need to release this buyer from the deal. I did one of those this year where the buyer absolutely was definitely willing and ready, but their ability, they could not sell another house. They couldn't get the financing in line. The pandemic hit. There were a lot of variables there and they couldn't do it. So they weren't able. And I knew that as a pro, told my client, don't worry. I know where the market's at now exactly for this property. I know the property even better myself. Post-home inspection, all sorts of issues came up. We dealt with them. We priced them. We knew how to handle this. We repriced the asking price, went back on, and actually ended up getting quite a bit more money than the offer that had been renegotiated where the buyer couldn't come through with his ability to perform. So again, there are times where you have to pay very close attention that it is time to end the deal because it's no longer a win-win situation. You can't win on both sides because it's not reasonable. That's the key point there, okay? But remember, most of the time, when you have a ready, willing, and able buyer, if you let your emotions get the better of you, if you begin to really get emotional that for example, you're being taken advantage of. And I talked about this in the last podcast episode. You can go back to Griffin Realty Group podcast, Ask-A-Griffin podcast 25. I talk about this term, cognitive distortions. During this very, very difficult emotional process of negotiating this property, and I don't care how savvy you are from a business standpoint, for some reason, especially when it's a primary residence or it's a family property, your emotions go into a very high level and you begin to get clouded on the details and the logic. It's a very important thing to remember here. But if you keep going back to zero base, look, why am I doing this in the first place? Because I really want to sell this property and liquidate it. It's costing me money. I can't get to the other side of my life without doing it. Whatever that reason is, then saying, do I have a ready, willing, and able buyer? Is it really going to make that big of a difference in my life to take care of a few of these items? And most of the time, the answer is it's not. You either compensate for them, you take care of them, but that's that win-win attitude that saves you all the time and aggravation. I have seen people reject a renegotiation after home inspection. I've seen people play too hardball during the original negotiation. By the way, not countering, even if it's a low ball. That's just not that win-win attitude. Even if it's a token counter, a small counter, if you feel defensive during the negotiation of a property, you will lose something. That's just my experience for a very, very long time doing this. You will lose something. So let me go back over these points that are key. How do you develop a win-win attitude is the question on the table under our subset of teaching here called negotiation, okay? This is one of our stages in selling a property when you get to this stage. Number one point is that remember that at the end of the negotiation, everybody has said yes which is essentially the definition of everybody felt like they were in a win-win given the external circumstances and the property features and details. 2, there are too many variables to control to perfect the process, especially post-home inspection. Just remember that. The variables are everywhere. So by trying to control everything and get it your way only is not win-win. It will stress you out, and that's just not how you get to that final yes. Lastly, always stay focused once you have a good buyer in front of you on the best news, that they are ready, willing, and able. They're just as anxious as you might be, and everybody's trying not to get taken advantage of. So the more truthful, transparent, and logical, he said, you are, the easier it is to feel like you had a win-win deal. All right, let me summarize it this way. It's important to remember that during a negotiation, although you're trying to win, it's important to realize that both sides must feel like they won. All right, remember, you can take immediate action to get started in the right direction if you need to sell or buy property right now or in the near future by taking advantage of our free step-by-step guides, free, he said, waiting for you at griffincourses.com. griffincourses.com, Griffin courses.com. Also, don't forget, if you want to stay up to date on how to do these things, negotiate a home and go through the whole entire home sale process, you can subscribe to the podcast, or you can go back and listen to all of this on social. You can subscribe by going to iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen. We also post all of these episodes on our social media channels, so they're not hard to find. But remember, griffincourses.com outlines this for you. So instead of trying to go back and listen to every podcast, you can simply go to the course and take it, and you'll be prepared, because these podcasts are based off of that course. We'd also appreciate it if you would share our content with other people just like you, so they get the help that they need in a timely manner. Now remember, nobody's coming for you. So take some action and go get to work on your own plan to sell your property and get through negotiation. And that'll really help you. Okay? And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.